So what can a massive 19th century Russian novel all about a seriously messed up family and a murder, what could that possibly teach you about running a business? Well, as it turns out, almost everything. Let's dive into Fyodor Dostoevsky's masterpiece, The Brothers Karamazov, and see how it's not just some classic book, but a timeless guide to the absolute chaos of human nature, and yes, even enterprise.
We're going to start with this line from Dmitri, who's the most passionate of the brothers. And it just perfectly nails the novel's central theme. The human heart is a total battlefield of contradictions. He says beauty is terrible. Why? Because it's tangled up with chaos. Good and evil, they live right next door to each other. Dostoevsky is basically telling us from page 1 that life and the people in it are never, ever simple.
So here's how we're going to tackle this giant of a book. First, we'll get into the story itself, a family divided. Then, we'll dig into the huge philosophical questions it's asking. After that, we're going to reframe the whole thing as an entrepreneur's dilemma. And finally, we'll wrap it all up with your final takeaway.
Okay, let's jump right into the plot. At its core, this is a crime story. It's a really gripping courtroom drama, and it's all centered on one of the most dysfunctional families you will ever read about.
So, meet the patriarch, Fyodor Karamazov. I want you to think of him as the worst CEO imaginable. Seriously, he's greedy, he's manipulative, and he's just completely negligent. He abandoned his kids, cheated them out of their inheritance, and he pretty much only lives for his own gratification. His murder is the event that kicks the entire story into high gear.
And here are his 3 legitimate sons. Each one is like a world unto himself. First, you've got Dmitri, the soldier, who's just all passion and impulse. Then there's Ivan, the brilliant intellectual, the atheist, who's driven by cold, hard reason. And finally, there's Alyosha, the gentle novice monk, who represents faith and spiritual love. These 3 aren't just characters, they're basically walking, talking philosophies, each one giving a different answer to the question of how to live.
So the flashpoint for all this drama is a bitter conflict between the father, Fyodor, and his oldest son, Dmitri. They are rivals for the same woman, Gushenka, and they're locked in this nasty fight over an inheritance of 3,000 rubles. So when Fyodor turns up dead, all the evidence, all of it, points directly at the passionate, desperate Dmitri.
So, that's the plot. But the murder and the trial? They aren't just about finding a killer. Not at all. Dostoevsky uses this whole setup as a stage to explore the deepest questions of human existence. This is the real so what of the novel.
This is it. This is the question that just echoes through every single page. It's the source of every character's torment and every character's hope. Is there some kind of divine order, or are we just totally alone in a meaningless universe?
The 2 sides of this debate are basically personified by Ivan and Alyosha. At one point, in a quiet tavern, Dmitri just asks them straight up. Ivan's answer, a flat no. Alyosha's, a simple there is. It's this stark divide that really forms the book's entire philosophical core.
But here, and this is so important, here is the consequence of Ivan's disbelief. He argues that if God and immortality don't exist, well then the very ideas of good and evil are meaningless. If there's no final judgment, then anything goes, anything is permissible. This radical idea that everything is lawful, it infects the other characters and it hangs like a shadow over the entire murder trial.
Now, Ivan illustrates his point with this famous story within a story, a chapter called The Grand Inquisitor. In it, Christ comes back to Earth during the Spanish Inquisition and is immediately arrested. And the Inquisitor tells him that true freedom is actually a terrible burden, and that humanity would much rather trade it for security, for bread, for someone to just tell them what to do.
So the whole point of the Grand Inquisitor's argument really boils down to this quote. He believes people don't want the freedom to find their own meaning, they want a purpose handed to them. It's this profound challenge, right? What's more important, free will or happiness, freedom or stability?
Which brings us to our final section, the now what. Okay, so how does any of this apply to the real world of deadlines and payroll and product launches? Well, let's try to reimagine the Karamazov family as, say, a startup that's on the brink of total collapse.
The first and maybe the most critical lesson here is all about radical self-honesty. Almost every single character in this book is lying, if not to other people, then to themselves. And this lack of integrity, this self-deception, is what fuels all the chaos and leads directly to tragedy. The antidote, the cure, comes from the wise monk Father Zosima.
Zozima gives this advice to the patriarch, Fyodor, but it's really a message for all of us, especially anyone in a leadership position. A leader who believes their own lies, who can't tell the difference between truth and fiction, they lose all respect, and they just can't build a foundation of trust. It's really the foundational sin of any dysfunctional organization.
Now, this is another key takeaway I just love. During the trial, the prosecutor defines what he calls the broad Karamazov character, this ability to hold two opposing extremes at the exact same time. Now, he means it as a flaw, but isn't this the very definition of an entrepreneur? You have to hold the big picture vision while also obsessing over the tiniest details. You have to be wildly optimistic, but also ruthlessly realistic. You have to be capable of the greatest heights and, be prepared for the greatest depths. So, how do you manage all that chaotic energy? Well, Dostoevsky gives us a blueprint through Father Zosima's teachings, which you can almost read as a guide to building a healthy company culture. Love your people, your team. Be not proud. Stay humble and actually listen. Have faith in your mission, your why. And finally, take radical responsibility for everything. This isn't just some monastic wisdom. It's a real framework for resilient, mission-driven leadership. So, after all that, what is the one crucial idea to take away from this dense, brilliant, incredible novel? After a journey through murder and philosophy and courtroom drama, what's left?
At the end of the day, the novel's final argument is this: our outer world is just a reflection of our inner world. That battle between Dmitri's passion, Ivan's reason, and Alyosha's faith, it's not just a literary device. It's the constant, internal negotiation that every single person and every organization has to manage if they want to avoid self-destruction and achieve something meaningful.
And that leaves us with one last question for you to think about. When you're facing a critical decision, when the pressure is really on, which brother takes over inside you? Is it the impulsive heart, the cold intellect, or the faithful spirit? The answer? Well, it defines a lot more than you might think.